Um, yeah, nice. And so I've got to leave a bit early. So Josh and Daniel's just finished work as well, so he'll be taking over for me when I have to go. But hello everyone. We've got 3 speakers today. So we have Oliver Fleming, Courtney Withers, and Jesse Morris, and they're all recent Tron graduates. So I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So we're gonna be running an informal Q&A with them. So feel free to put questions in the chat or unmute your mic while they're speaking to ask questions. And yeah, here we go. So can we start off with just hearing a bit about you guys and how you got to where you are today?
Someone want to go first? I don't mind.
Yeah, you start off, Jesse.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, hi guys. It's interesting to be back on SUMO panel. So I graduated mechatronics computer science last year after doing 6 years of uni, which is a nice long time. I was on SUMO as well for 3 years, so I have a bit of a relationship with them. I was the president back in, well, I don't know, 2018 or 19, 18 maybe, I don't quite remember. So yeah, I've got a long history with them. When I was at uni, I was pretty lucky enough to do a bunch of internships and internship experience. I did some research scholarships at the ACFR, which for those who don't know is the Australian Centre for Field Robotics. So I did a couple of things there as well. And then I have a bit of a background working in agricultural robotics, as well as I did some stuff in space. And right now I'm working at a company building underwater autonomous drone systems. I've been here for just over 3 months now. So I started in December last year, literally the day after end of semester party. That was an interesting morning, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's kind of my industry experience, I guess, a little overview. And yeah, Ollie, why don't you
yeah, sure. Okay. So my experience is definitely different to that. So I did mechatronics and commerce. Interesting combination. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people unless they're really into that sort of thing, because I wasn't. So during my time at uni, I focused much more on the academics, and that's something which in about my 3rd or my 4th year, I definitely found to be not so much the wrong choice, but I definitely could have focused more upon doing research and things like that with ACFR. So during my 4th year, I applied and got into the ESIPS program, for the engineering ESIPS program, which basically put me in an engineering position, an engineering role in a company to do my thesis. And that's what I ended up doing. And that was basically one of my more major introductions to like the engineering field, and from which I used that to get more of experience in AI, in machine learning specifically, which is what I'm currently doing. So I'm currently a systems engineer at a place called DroneShield, focusing upon RFAI, so machine learning in radio, essentially. And yeah, that's where I am about now. Court, why don't you give us your intro?
Classic on the mic. Hi everyone, I'm Courtney. I also graduated at the end of last year with Ollie and Jesse. 5 years for me, not the extra year, which has been quite nice. Hats to you. I did mechatronics engineering and project management. I know Ollie just undersold the double degree, but I loved it. I think it made doing engineering a lot better because it gave me a little bit of time to do other things rather than just suffering for 5 years or 4 years straight, which was good. I don't really work as, I'm not an engineer, I can't really say that. I don't work in engineering at the moment. I actually work for Microsoft. So I moved into tech sort of versus more pure engineering. In my final year, I actually got an internship at Microsoft, and I used to work in modern work. So like Excel, Microsoft Teams, Office 365. That was a lot of fun, but I thought may as well go and use the 5 years of suffering. So I actually work in cloud solutions now. So my formal role, like title, is app innovation, but that sounds made up. So I like to just tell people that I work in cloud solutions. So I work in the enterprise segment, so deal with that's sort of like the top 400 customers in Australia, and then I work in the public sector side of that. So that's me.
Awesome, thanks guys. So I'll ask this first question, then I'll hand over to Daniel. So we're gonna start off with just a bit about uni. I know Ollie, you did thesis. Courtney, I'm not sure. I mean, Ollie did ESIPs. I'm not sure, Courtney, if you did ESIPs or did you do thesis? Yep. So I was wondering if you guys could like have it out. Like, what's better, ESIPs or thesis? Just for some, like I'm a third year, not sure what's in store there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just hit this quickly. With Courtney's point for definitely not attacking doing a double degree. Double degree is very much a good thing to do. I was very much just attacking the commerce.
Oh, it makes sense.
My double degree. Yeah, that was questionable, perhaps is the way to put it.
Fair enough.
I think to answer your question, Georgia, I think it depends on who you ask if doing ESIPs is better or not. I think you get a very different experience if you're in ESIPs than if you do a thesis at the university with a researcher. Sometimes it can be better, sometimes it could be worse. It also sort of depends on the person and what you're interested in. And it kind of goes both ways a little bit. Like sometimes if you just sort of want to do thesis and get out rather than doing actual research, some ESIPs can be good for that because you end up working in a company. So for those, I don't know, does everyone know what ESIPs is? Maybe for some of the, I don't know how many first years are here, but
Everyone
Just give a short intro.
Everyone want to chuck up a thumbs up if you like know what ESIPs is and what thesis is.
And maybe if you don't know what it is, put up like say it. So
Let's let Jesse. Why don't you give a short intro to
yeah, okay. So ESIPs is basically, I have no idea what it stands for. It's like I don't know what it stands for, but it's basically the industry placement program that you can do in final year university. It's 6 months, right, Ollie?
Yeah, so it's a 6-month program which you basically use that replaces your thesis. So rather than doing thesis in 2 blocks of 12 units, so thesis A and thesis B, which is usually done over 2 semesters, it replaces both those units, and instead you do a 6-month intensive placement at a company. And in return, so during that time, you do write a dissertation, you do write a thesis, but primarily what you do is putting you into a company and seeing how that company works and operates, and you basically complete a project of your own choice with some caveats during that time, and you write a thesis upon that and you get marked for that. And to sweeten the deal, you get given a scholarship for that. But that's like, it's nice, but that should most certainly not be why you do an ESIPs thing. And it's ESIPs is very much like, again, what Jesse said earlier. It's very much hit and miss in terms of if you find a project which is extremely interesting, is very much like, this is what I want to do it, then definitely go for it. If there's nothing like that in the ESIPs options for your year or that you're applying, definitely do not go for it, because very much the advantage that doing a thesis has over ESIPs is you can literally do whatever you want. The hardest bit is just finding a supervisor which is experienced in whichever area that you want to do a project in. That's genuinely the hardest bit. Once you've found that supervisor, then you can basically go into whatever project in the area you want. So that's the advantage for doing a thesis.
Yeah, and I think the thing with ESIPs as well is like you, as Ollie was saying, you sort of get stuck with a project, but also like you get stuck with the company, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So if you have a good company with a mentor and a team that like actually give a shit about the fact that they've just got some person there for 6 months doing work, then fantastic, because you get to draw on all their experiences. You sometimes just hear horror stories of people being just like left completely in the dark for like 6 months. They just have no idea. I mean, to be fair, that happens with non-ESIPs thesis as well, but it's sort of worse because you're isolated in an environment because you're basically working for like 6 months. It's almost like a full-time job for like 6 months. So there are like pros and cons. The massive pro, and also like the companies vary in like quality in terms of what you want to do as well. So like all of the mechatronic space kids should probably know that there are 2 ESIPs positions with JPL at NASA. in Pasadena. Like, hopefully everyone knows what JPL and NASA are. And basically they're the like, everyone wants those, but only 2 people have them. So that one's really competitive. But you have to be space and mechatronics. Oh, just space. You have to be space major in AMME if you want that. But then yeah, it varies from like, Ollie was at RTCMA, obviously like Microsoft and stuff, as well as like, there's a whole bunch of other companies, but so it depends what you want and what you're interested in, I guess. I didn't do ESIPs and I was happy that I didn't do ESIPs, but it does vary.
I also didn't do ESIPs. And it was good because I could work and then also do my thesis, which was a little bit stressful, but it meant that I kind of got that dual dynamic where I got to do a thesis in machine learning, but then I also got to work at Microsoft at the same time. And so that was pretty cool. So sometimes you get that nice balance where you can actually do and try a couple other different things versus you do have to sort of spend 6 months at a company doing a certain project with a team and you can't really move out of that sort of space if you do ESIPs. But again, each of their own, they might have a really cool project on the year that you apply, put your hat in the ring. That's all you can do. And maybe that'll suit you awesome. You might get a job at the end of it as well, which is, if that's what you want, then that's a really nice way in as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, this one's just from me. So I'm curious, is ESIPs just a UCID thing or are you competing against students from other universities too?
It's just an ESIPs thing.
It's
just
UCID.
Just a UCID thing.
Just UCID.
Other unis do similar things with similar and the same companies, but ESIPs itself is very much a UCID thing. There are UCID spots that everyone applies for.
You're competing against like that cohort essentially, because it's you apply for like a scholarship, I guess, and then you go do like interviews and things like that.
Yeah. So generally, like they post, the engineering faculty post like a list of here's all the potential positions and here are the projects and here's the person that will be leading your potential supervisor leading that project. Look through these. What do you find interesting? You find the 4 or 5. You apply to 4 or 5 of the projects and you put them in order of what you want most. And you say, here's my CV. Here is my transcript. Here's a little little paragraph about why I'm applying for this.
It's like applying for a job.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah.
Cool. Just I got a few questions prepared, but just before I go through that, everyone here, if you're feel free to put a question in the chat to ask our panel, and
or just like shout out.
Yeah, or that too.
Whatever.
Cool. So
I've just got one. Sorry, Daniel. Like,
sure.
Is thesis the same in terms of like having to like apply? Like, is it like competitive like with certain lecturers?
Not ESIPs. Do you mean like not?
Is it first come? Not ESIP's thesis. Is it like first come first serve? Like just whoever gets in, or do the lecturers prioritize certain students?
Depends who you ask.
Okay.
It's one of those things. So at the end of the my understanding is you basically apply to, it's on like on Sonia and stuff, right? If I think at least that's what it was last year. I don't know if it still is this year, but or 2 years ago. And you basically like the supervisors get a short list of students, right? And then they select from that short list.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it gets shortlisted. And then the supervisors just pick the ones they want. They have a certain amount of spots depending on the amount of projects that they have and how much time they want to give to undergrad thesis students, right? This is the other question. And so it kind of pays to know the supervisor beforehand or have talked to them beforehand, because if they like see your name on the list and like, I have no idea who this person is, they're not really likely to select you for whatever the project is, right? But if they know who you are and you've talked to them and you've shown or expressed interest in their area of research, right, they're just more likely to say yes to you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. First question. What was the biggest challenge that you guys faced going into industry? And also, what are some common challenges you often see that graduate engineers come across? Or is that a bit open-ended?
No, it's fine.
No, that's right.
Cool. Sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just saying that's fine. I mean, I'll kick us off. Biggest challenge going into industry. Look, it can be It can be hard, like I think it's very company specific, and I also think it's very role specific as well. And so I think you'll get different levels of support depending on where you go. I think it's important to consider when you're walking out of uni what you want in terms of like what type. Do you want to work in a team? Do you want to work in more of a silo? Do you want to, be an engineer? Do you want to be more customer facing? And I think leaving uni, those feel like very big questions, but I think it's important to step back and look at them and answer them. I think in terms of, I guess, challenges then entering in industry, like it's always hard, you're sort of fresh faced. You might be entering a company. Like for me in particular, I know this is probably different for Jesse and for Ollie, but like Microsoft, really big organization, not a startup. Most people in my team are like 45 plus, small kids, years of experience, have like written books on cloud integration. Like if you're like, oh yeah, enterprise integration patterns, and you're like, haha, yeah, cool, I made a turtle bot move around once. So for me personally, my biggest challenge moving into industry has been upskilling quickly, and also learning to be comfortable with asking for help and definitely not knowing the answer to lots of things. I would say has been one of my biggest challenges. And obviously in Tron, we feel that all the time. Like you get an assignment, you're like, I have no idea what's going on ever, constantly. So that was kind of good because I felt a little bit prepared for that. But I think it's really, for me, it was getting comfortable with just being like, it's okay. You're not going to know what .NET is tomorrow. You're also not going to write a book on enterprise integration, but that's okay because tech moves really quickly. You know what open source is, you know what Python is, you bring a different skill set, you're young, you have a fresh perspective, all of that sort of stuff. And I know people say that all the time, but it's powerful in teams. So I think that was probably one of my challenges moving in. But yeah, Ollie and Jesse work in startup land, so a different experience.
Yeah, totally. But I think that the difference is really good because not most people don't end up kind of in the positions that Ollie and I are in, working reasonably technical jobs in a small company, which at least for me, it's sort of, it feels quite reminiscent of doing like a really large Tron project, except now there's like money on the line. But in general, at least for me, the main thing was kind of, I guess like more of a mental thing, and going from like, at the end of the day, just like kind of being more professional about the problems and the way you go about the problems. In Tron, they talk about it, but no one ever does it. And in this situation, it's actually taking some of those slightly more soft skills and making them more concrete, because that is important when you have like a 20-person company. It's not just like the 6 people on your team that you see every day till like 3 in the morning, right? It's now people who don't know exactly what's going on. So it's being able to like communicate back and forth between the really technical things that you're doing and actually explaining it to people on other teams that don't know what they're doing. Oh, something's going on. But yeah, for me, and I guess I have a similar experience in terms of like upskilling, but it's only because like I have a very technical job that involves like very basic extensions of stuff that I was doing in final year uni and in my thesis as well. So it's still upskilling, but it's on the same like pathway rather than sidestepping, which is what Courtney has been doing. So a little bit different, but the transition hasn't been too bad. But I guess I've also worked mostly in startups for like the last 4 years. So for me, I was kind of used to it. I think if I went and jumped off to like a big company, I would struggle a lot just in the different environment, the way people work, everyone's mentality. Yeah. Ollie?
I guess I mean that you two basically covered everything I was going to say.
Yeah.
In terms of like most difficult things in terms of once you've left uni and actually looking for a place, not placement, but like a job, a graduate position somewhere. I guess the most important part is to figure out what area of, I mean, if you are going to do something in Tron or Tron related, or even just engineering related, find what area you are interested in. And ideally, this should be done during a thesis. In your thesis, you should be figuring out and exploring things that you find interesting and using that as a testing bed in some ways to figure out what you want to do, not so much permanently, but at least the next 5 years, say. and then use that to go like, okay, so me personally, I did like machine learning my thesis, and doing that, I was like, oh, this shit's really, really cool. Let's see what I can make of it. And so I basically just applied to anywhere where I saw AI or machine learning in a job position that was not at like a finance company, I applied to it essentially. And the way I actually got this position is just literally from a mate recommending me, saying, hey, I heard of this company. I think they're hiring AI engineers. Why don't you apply for it? And I did. And it's like literally just spitballing for as many different positions you can that have in their title or in their first sentence of their description this topic area, or saying we're looking for graduates for this topic area. And that's genuinely, you need to look for places where ideally they're like, we are aware that you're a graduate and therefore you will know fuck all basically. But we are willing to teach you. We have experienced people here who are willing to teach you, because let's face it, in your first years, you do not want to, sorry, your first years at a company, you do not want to be the big fish. You do not want to be a medium fish. You want to be learning from the people around you. So that means finding a company which has those people which you can learn off of. And so yeah, that's probably one of the harder things to do. And finding a company, not so much as in finding, as I said, people to learn off of, but also people who you can learn off of and are willing to not so much teach you, but to like at least show you the ropes and show you how to teach yourself and help you in that sort of thing. Like they're not going to be your tutors, but they are still people that you can learn off of. Yeah, so that's that from that, for me at least.
Great. Oh wait, were you about to say something, Courtney?
Oh, I was just going to say, Hamish asked a question in the chat that I like, sort of answered. But it was, so he's going to Microsoft to complete move away from Tron, or just transitioning to having a more software-based skill set. It's interesting. I think for me, I was initially like, oh, I should go do something that uses these 5 years of things that I've learned. But I think don't discount the usage of those skills in such like a broad range of applications. And even, in what I do at the moment, it is more software based. Like I don't do a lot of coding. I work in pre-sales technically, which sounds weird, but anyways, long complicated story. But what we do is we build cloud solutions for enterprise customers. And so that will be like building demos and creating APIs and things like that. But interestingly, like how Tron fits into that, like you would be surprised when things just like crop up. Like my thesis was in machine learning of LiDAR data, and my boss knew that. And the other day, like someone pings me and was like, oh my gosh, hey, one of our customers, they want to do machine learning of LiDAR data in forests. Here, you're the person. I was like, okay, cool. Anyway, so like get on this call. It's like, Department of like forestries or something. Like, some like huge account. And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what we want to do. And I was like, they were like, do you know how to do this? I was like, oh, I mean, sort of, kind of. They're like, oh, okay, cool, great. So never discount. I mean, that's a very specific example, which I think comes with the benefit of working in a very large organization with lots of customers. But your skill set is so transferable. And so, whether you end up using it today, tomorrow, you sidestep, you use part of it today and part of it tomorrow. I think Tron, that was the best thing that it ever taught me. It was just being able to have this really wide skill set that you would be able to use here and there. And like your capacity to learn is so great. And so that's, I feel like, just one of the best things from that. So maybe one day I will go back to more roboticsy sides of things. But it's kind of cool that sometimes things just pop up and someone's like, hey, here you're the LiDAR person. I was like, okay, sure, that's me.
I think, sorry, I'll finish up if you haven't said anything.
I'm done.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting that point has been raised, because I think for the most part, I think, Hamish just made a comment in the chat about a lot of Tron graduates transfer their skills over to web, not necessarily web dev, but like software stack, right? Like enterprise software stack. And I think if you look at if you ask majority of people, they'll say Tron engineers mostly don't go into mechatronics and robotics. So those skills are mostly transferable, and companies like Tron engineers, for the reasons that Courtney was talking about, in terms of it's sort of like we're used to having problems that don't have a solution. We're used to working in that sort of space, and that's why it's why we get hired a lot of the time. But I was just going to say, on the flip side, don't discount if you're interested in like the more mechatronics technical side of things, and you're hearing, oh, everyone goes off into like software and stuff, don't discount actually doing the stuff in your field. I think like there's like a kind of a 2 to 3 split in this particular panel tonight. Most of the time it's not, most of the time Tron engineers won't go into the technical field, but it's 100% like growing in Australia if you want to do really technical, particularly like things like machine learning and things like that. It's growing like hugely and really, really quickly. So by the time you guys graduate, there'll be a lot more jobs in that area, but they are a bit harder to find, and you do have to kind of persevere a little bit more if you want to look for like super technical roles, but they are there. So if people say, oh, you won't get a job in technical mechatronics, it's not true. You do just have to look a bit harder.
Great. So what's one thing you wish you knew before, well, I guess it can be before you started your current position, or even starting internships during uni, that would have been great to know, before you started?
Should have asked for more money. No, but I guess, like, to be serious, I guess I was a lot more concerned about how people would look at, how like my new co-workers would look at me in terms of, oh, there's this bloke, he just straight from uni, we have to teach him for 6 months, or is it all useful? And I'm just like, oh, okay, that's kind of like not a great feeling. But it's very much not true in terms of, if you are willing to learn and you're willing to put the effort and learn quickly, then it's not a 6-month thing. Ideally, it should be, at least in startups, it's much more like you'll be on the job I was coding within 25 minutes of sitting down at my desk for the first time, for instance. There's definitely more set up for bigger companies. I think Courtney could definitely attest to that. But yeah, like it's not, you don't have to be so worried about, if they've given you the position, trust them to think that they know something about what they're doing. Like, they're not going to hire idiots, and if they've hired you, ipso facto, you must not be an idiot. I guess it's the way to look at it there.
Any input from Jesse or Courtney, or good?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think particularly when you take on like internships, maybe not full-time jobs. Full-time jobs may be slightly different. I guess it does hold, but yeah, for internships, if you're taking them, if you're lucky enough to get them in like 2nd, 3rd, 4th year, that kind of thing, do trust, like, they are there for learning experiences. Like, you are not meant to know everything. Like when you graduate uni, you're not meant to know everything. Like that, I think that's the thing, as Courtney already said, like, she's not meant to know what .NET is in a week, and that's not something we covered at uni, right? And it's not something you're necessarily meant to have covered, but they have hired you. So trust, they're hiring you for your skill set and your ability to learn, and anything you know on top of that is a bonus, like in 99% of cases, right? And in 99% of companies. So like, take that learning experience and just like ask a shit ton of questions. Don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions if you don't understand something, because that's where you're going to learn. It's the same kind of in class, right? Like, just don't afraid to ask the dumb questions or not know something, even if you think you should, because you're now in a place where they don't expect you to know everything. And if they do, then, well, like, probably not the best culture of that company if they expect you to know everything when they first hire you. So yeah, just like, don't be afraid to kind of use that as a learning experience, because that's what it is.
Yeah, I guess the messages don't really lie on your CV, and you should be good.
Yeah, I mean,
Did you lie on your CV, Jesse?
No, I don't need to.
And embellishing is one thing. Don't lie. They'll pick it up so quickly in any interview.
Yeah. It's more about I don't know. CVs are a weird one. Maybe I've also never really done like a proper big company interview, so I never really had to go through that like 10-round CV filtering process. So I'm maybe not the best person to talk to about that sort of thing. But yeah, don't lie in general, I think.
Well, that's a shame, because my next question is specifically about interviewing. So anyway, so what was the hardest thing for both, well, I guess assume Oliver and Courtney then, if Jesse's gonna, anyway, what was the hardest thing you had to deal with when interviewing for companies and just trying to find a job?
I did lots of interviews, like so many. I think for Microsoft, I did 7 maybe interviews. For another company, I interviewed at a tech, like a engineering company, like a sensor company. Those were more difficult, I found. Like they were more obviously tech heavy. So for that one, I did a technical assessment interview, which was an hour, which was sort of like pull up a spec sheet, answer questions relative to the spec sheet, which was fine. The guy was also pretty cool. So like it was, if you had a question, you like ask a clarifying question, which was all good. And then it was like a bit of code, what's the code doing, so on and so forth. So that one was all good. But then, yeah, and then it was like also a 2-hour personality interview. So that was that other one. But at Microsoft, I mean, it was interviewing for different roles. Interviews, I think, like it's more about just being like, I know it also sounds a bit kitsch, but like being authentic. At least that would always be my advice going into an interview. Do your background research, definitely. For one of them, I did not do my background research, and the person was like, "Oh, so can you tell me the difference between like IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS?" And I was like, I mean, I can try and work my way through it. He was like, all right, give it a shot. I was like, all right, SaaS, pretty sure software as a service. So I'm going to start up there. P, not sure. I'm going to go with infrastructure. He was like, correct. I was like, okay, cool. P. Literally, this is me in an interview. So never be afraid to just absolutely throw it out of the park. Yeah, I think just be authentic, do what you can, do your background research, and group interviews, they're a little bit, they're not too bad. Honestly, my ones at Microsoft were fine. I feel like just never be that person who's like, I got good advice actually for a group interview once, which was don't try and take control of the interview. And that doesn't say you have to not be like a participating member, but it's like really trying to lean into like, how can we all productively get to our endpoint, which I thought was good advice. One of the weirdest questions I ever got in an interview was, describe a time a piece of feedback hurt you. I was like, I don't know, which was like not even like describe you got a piece of feedback. No, describe a time when it hurt you. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, people don't give feedback generally. It's like a general rule of corporate. No one does it well. So anyways, I would say just be confident, be authentic, but also, yeah, don't be afraid to be like, that's an interesting question. Like ask a clarifying question. Especially in technical interviews, if you're looking at something and you're like, I have no idea, ask them, be like, okay, well, in my understanding, it would be blah, 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 but can I ask, do you mean relative to this or relative to this? And often they'll give you more information as you go through. So yeah, I would say just give it a hot crack, honestly. No point stressing over it. What's the worst thing that happens?
Yeah,
You don't know what IaaS versus SaaS is.
Yeah, I think the other thing about interviews, like so I have done interviews, but not like the long, like, because at big companies you have to do that like multiple round stuff. I've never done that, but like having talked to lots of people who have and things like that, and even just that example that Courtney gave of like there is definitely, as much as like have a hot crack, there's definitely a skill to interviewing, and there's definitely things like you shouldn't say, and there's always questions, like there are like weird questions that they ask like that, and you're like, what, like why, who came up with this, like why are you asking me this? And so it is definitely like a practice thing to some extent, or like, talk to your friends who are doing interviews, kind of get a collection of like random questions they might ask and sort of prep for those, sort of like doing an exam. There's like a way you go about doing it, and the more you do them and the more you talk to other people, I didn't say that, the better you'll get at it, essentially. And the more like, they're not necessarily hard, but they're like, you sort of have to have done them before to do well to some extent.
And that's a really good, like, talk to someone about why you want the job, like someone else, because the questions that you're going to get are likely going to be similar. Why do you want this job? Why are you going to be a good fit for the team? What are you going to bring to the team? What's going to be your point of difference? Tell me something you're passionate about. Tell me something outside of work that you like to do, so on and so forth.
This is more from me. So I'm just curious at the moment, do you have like a certain, I won't say endpoint in your career where you want to be, but a position that's like a course from now where you're quite passionate to get to, or do you sort of just go with the flow and see where it takes you?
I do, but I think I'm the odd one out in potentially in that it's not in the industry. So yes, for me, I want to go back. I want to do postgrad. So it's just a little bit different, but I think the idea is still the same. I think it's always a good idea to have a goal of where you want to get to, whether it be in this sense, like my goal is both personal and I guess professional. Like the idea is that it will help progress my professional career. And I think for me and what I want to achieve, the best way of doing that is going to do a postgrad. But I think it's always a good idea to kind of maybe not be in a 1 year or 5 year plan or that sort of thing, but have an idea of where you want to get to or what you want to improve, whether it be technical or professional or like soft skills or something like that, because that will not just see you like sitting somewhere at your desk every day. It's something you actually can try and do and progress and move forward. But yeah, so for me, it's a technical kind of progression of my skill set is what my goal is, and then to bring that back into industry.
Great. Any input from okay. All right, don't worry. So
Oh no, I'll say something if you
okay.
if you want.
I'm not gonna force you to say anything.
No. I was just gonna say this is really good advice that I got from not my current manager, but my manager last year. And he made me, when I was trying to decide on jobs, because I was super transparent with him, I was like, I'm applying other places. This is what I'm doing. Like, I think being able to have a relationship with your manager like that is very special. You don't always find it, but him and I love that man, king. Anyways, he said to me, he was like, write down what you want in the next 10 years. Like, not what you want to do, like what you want. And they sound like very similar things, but they're actually a little bit different, because like you don't need to know what job you're going to do to need to know that you like want to work in a team, or that you want to work overseas, or that you want to work in a philanthropic lens, or that you want to own a home by the time you're 30, or you want to have kids. Like, step back. I like to think about it by stepping back and putting down on paper those real concrete things, because we're going to change careers so many times in our life. I know I definitely will. Most of us are going to. Like, our retention for our generation is usually like 2 to 3 years early in career. You know, we pick something up, we learn, we move on. And so I think actually using those real concrete things about what you personally want to guide those decisions is really good and quite powerful. So yeah, step back and do that. So for me, I didn't know if I like wanted to be an engineer. I was like, is this what I want? Like, do I want to sit at a desk and code? I don't know. And so it made me step back and be like, okay, well, let me break that question down. You know, like, I want to work with people. I want to work in a team. I actually want to work on customers. I want to problem solve, but I didn't want some of those other technical aspects in my day-to-day. So I guess how that relates to that long-term goal, you know, I have my list of things, which is like what I want to do in the next 10 years. And so those things hopefully are gonna keep me moving along into some different places and some cool things. But yeah, take opportunities as well. You know, like as Ollie said, someone sent him through the job app for his place and he was like, easy, let's apply. And I think those things are what will like push you into some of those really cool spaces.
Cool. So what's your current workload looking like right now compared to when you're in university?
Do you mean during thesis or during university? Because those are two
right,
different questions.
Well, maybe you can cover both. I'm not too.
A lot
up to
less
you.
than during thesis. Similar levels to other times during university. Weekdays, similar levels, but weekends, at least my weekends are free of work. The only coding or anything like that I do on the weekends is like purely my own projects, purely just me screwing around. During the weeks, I probably start anywhere between 8 and 8:30, and during crunch time finish anywhere between like 6, 7, maybe even 8 sometimes. So very much a lot less than I was doing during university. So life is a lot better in that sense. yeah, and I'm not sure what Cord and Jesse are like, but it's probably maybe something similar.
What do you mean you don't know? Yeah, I'm about the same as Ollie. It's more than just doing 9 to 5 for sure, but that's sort of expected when you're at a startup, which both of us are. So yeah, I'm in pretty early. I'm very early rise. I'm in at like 8-ish, and I'll probably leave. Like basically, I'm looking around the office, and most of the team is still here right now. So we'll probably leave at like 6:15 most days. We haven't really had like a crunch time where we're doing like super duper hours, and the bosses try not to do that. They might stay late, but they don't really ask anyone else to stay late. But people do. People get involved and invested in their work, and people do. But definitely less than uni, and definitely less than when I was doing thesis. No one should ever have to work. You work like that once, and that's it. Like, it's insane. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think pretty similar. Microsoft, obviously big orgs often tend to set the rules, and especially in tech. They're like, one of the things I love most about work is the flexibility in the way I get to work, and people really adhere to that at Microsoft. Like, you'll see in people's calendars, like 3 to 4 p.m. I'm picking up the kids, and people firmly respect that. Like, you don't book meetings over it. We all have open calendars. We set our team status messages. If you want to step away and go have lunch, you just step away and go have lunch for 2 hours. Like, no one's going to at you for it. In saying that, that's not to say that we don't work. Like, my normal hours are pretty much 9 to 5-ish, but if you've got, like, literally the other day, it was a Friday morning and someone was like, hey, yeah, like, I need this done by Monday. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what is it? It was like a costing thing, and I was expecting, 5 line items, 300. I was like, I'm sorry, you need this by Monday? Could you have sent this to me 2 weeks ago? No, apparently they couldn't have. So days like that, you put in more hours. Other days, honestly, Fridays, I'm pretty sure most of our business clocks off at midday. I think that's pretty standard, but like, it would be pretty rare. Like, if someone booked a Friday meeting, you'd be like, well, maybe let's move that one. Like, let's shuffle that along. So look, especially in tech, I think for all, like, because although, we work in different big org, small org, there's still that kind of tech culture around the way we work, the flexibility we work, and things like that. So that's actually quite nice.
Yeah, I agree with that flexibility as well. They're super chill, super happy to like let you do whatever, just as long as you're like ticking off the work. They don't really mind so much the hours you do, or when, I guess.
I know this next one can be a bit tricky to answer because their difficulty is like sort of relative to where you are in your skill progression. But would you say the work you're doing right now, in like as you've graduated, is a step up from uni, or you could say it's almost easier?
I mean, I can kick it off while at least
or you're more experienced, so it just is easier, I guess.
I'm in the position where I have a very technical role, and it is much harder. It is equivalent or more than what I was doing for thesis and like final year mechatronic electives, so advanced control and experimental robotics for people when they get to there. So it's that level plus, which I think is very unusual. But yeah, so equivalent to or harder than.
I think I'd be pretty much similar to that. There are definitely days where it's like you're doing like data labeling, say, in which case it could be like a trained monkey could do this. But like there are also days where it's like, yeah, there's some cool stuff here which is real hard, and you have to really think about it. And like most of the time you can't do it, and you have to like ask someone, oh hey, how this is a like, fucking advanced Kalman filter. I've heard of these. I've only implemented them once. What? So yeah, it definitely advanced plus. But it's interesting. It definitely means you're never bored.
I think for me, it's probably obviously, a big tech learning curve. But also I think it's like getting comfortable with not knowing the answer to something and being in front of really important people for me, like, because enterprise accounts, like, you're walking into a meeting with a CIO and they're asking you questions and you're there like, no worries. Yeah, I'll connect your TIBCO and your this to your Red Hat OpenShift. Like, so again, it's different skill sets. I think it's a different level of anxiety as well. I feel like at uni, things are complicated, but you have lots of people around you. You can ask for help. For me, although I have a team, because I work on accounts, I'm kind of siloed in those accounts. So again, you're also walking into those meetings where you are the person who's supposed to know the most. But that's a nuance more of the job versus kind of being in industry specifically. So yeah, I think it ebbs and flows depending on what you're doing. Some things, I'm a PowerPoint technician. I literally make slide decks and think like, oh my God, that's beautiful. And I'm like, haha, thanks. So some days easy, other days crying. You'll never know. No, I don't cry at work.
I think that's like the slogan of engineering in general.
Yeah, true. It never stops.
Yeah, some days easy,
morphs.
some days crying. Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. In that sense, it doesn't change. It hasn't changed for any of us, I think.
No.
So yeah.
Cool. So are there any parts of your job that I wouldn't say you detest, but maybe something you didn't know about ahead of time and you are not a big fan of? Maybe that's like corporate politics or something else, but yeah. Anything at all? You love your job?
Yeah, like no, not really.
I don't know anything
Obviously,
about corporate politics. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. Like, it's not something I've ever run into. I don't know if it's just a thing that happens always in TV shows and it gets harped on about a lot. But I don't know. There are definitely not so much things I didn't like, but things I didn't expect to do are like when if you're designing a product, you're designing a device and you have to test it and you have to make sure that the whole thing works. Like you don't expect to have to write a report essentially, or at least I wasn't expecting to have to do reports and that sort of thing. And it's like, oh, we do, funnily enough, when you have a device that's made and you have to describe it to a customer, surprise, surprise, they might want some documentation to go along with it. And it's just like, wow, okay, all those reports I wrote during uni, weirdly enough, some of those like 100-page ones I wrote, there were some useful things I did in those and some useful things I learned writing those. LaTeX is your friend, people. Make sure you learn that. That shit's useful.
Microsoft Word is your friend, Ollie.
Nah, LaTeX. Yeah, I'm same as Ollie. Like, yeah.
But yeah, like, I guess it's just little things like that where it's not bad. It's just surprising, and I like writing reports. Like, when I have a nicely written report, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, it's definitely not something I want to do all day, but like, it's a satisfying thing getting done. But yeah, in terms of things I don't really like, there isn't really anything I particularly don't like. I mean, you run into a bug and you're bashing your head against the wall for 4 hours. Not fun, but like not unsurprising, I guess.
Yeah, I'm the same as Ollie, basically. So almost the same. I was gonna say about the report writing and stuff, basically the same. But I think that's also just a result of our job and the fact that our workplaces are cool and our colleagues, like I love all the guys I work with, and yeah, it's good. So
He says himself.
what? I hope they like me. Okay.
Okay. Back onto, I guess this segues off. Do your colleagues like you? What's the workplace culture? So how much of like a shift do you find, or how much of a difference do you find, say, from the culture we have at uni to at work? And then do you enjoy the culture at work as well?
It is eerily similar to uni. Like it's like come 2 or 3 o'clock on a Friday arvo, or sometimes even a Thursday if it's been a shit week. Someone will just grab beers from the fridge and be like, okay, no work is being done up to this point. We're just like, not having fun's the wrong word, like we're still working at our desk, but it's like very much more of a social situation, I guess. You're talking to people, you're talking about what projects they're working on. It's just in areas where you aren't working in, like you have a very tangential idea of what they're doing. It's just nice to hear about what they're doing. So it's a very good atmosphere. If only just because you get to talk to people, and talking to people is fun. But also you get to talk about what they're doing, hear about what they're doing, and essentially learn more about different areas of engineering or wider areas that are more than just engineering. Like I was chatting to our legal expert, to our lawyer the other day, and just like, oh, I was aware that we need to get certification and permission from the government to do X. Did not realize how much work goes into it. And she just went on a diatribe for 20 minutes explaining the whole process. And I probably remember like 10% of it, but like it was really interesting just hearing about her talking about that. So yeah, it's definitely a good atmosphere to have. I reckon that's definitely an important thing to have.
Our culture is very different, but like it's a very different vibe to uni. It's a really good culture, but it's something that Microsoft has worked very hard on, because in the past they did not have a good culture. It was a boys club, and that was kind of a big part of it. Whereas now it's really different, and that was something that was really important to me when I picked my job, like when I decided to go this path actually versus going into more technical engineering. Like when I interviewed at the other place that I was interviewing at, like didn't meet a single woman, no one. I was like, are there any women on the team? They're like, no. I was like, okay, cool. So it can be a very different vibe, but at Microsoft, I like got to go to a senior leadership team, like a senior leadership meeting once, with, like the managing director of Australia. And I remember like walking into this room and there being like women at the table, and people were like listening to them. And I know that sounds so toxic, but I just remember it being so affronting, because these are like a billion-dollar industry in Australia, and all sitting at the table having like this really rich conversation. And I just remember that being so potent. And so at Microsoft, like culture is super like it's a really big focus. Like in our performance reviews, we have diversity and inclusion core priorities. Like every single person in the business must be doing something actively to work on diversity and inclusion, whether that be at a manager level and individual contributor level. Like you have to be doing something, otherwise you don't meet your performance targets. So like beyond our KPIs, like that actually is something that's important. So look, I love the culture. It comes in also to the flexibility. It comes into like making work a more understanding place as well. And so for me, I really like that part about it. And, when I did my Microsoft interviews, most of the questions weren't technical. Like most of them, they're hiring based on character, who you are, what you like to do, the way you interact with others and things like that. So for me, I really like the culture, and it's a part of big reason why I chose to go this path. But yeah, very different to uni.
Yeah, I think I'm probably a bit similar to Ollie. I would say work is not like uni, and if it is, it's probably not a great place. As much as like obviously I love uni, but you don't really need that want that in a work environment. It is different, but I would say I'm definitely it's closer to the kind of it's just engineering technical startup. We have a beer fridge Thursday afternoons. We have a couple of beers. Very chill. As a smaller company, it's definitely something we're working on, being inclusive and having diversity, which we don't have, but we're definitely like actively trying to improve that. But yeah, it was definitely a change from uni, but there's a lot of commonalities in kind of the openness that people have talking to each other, technical, non-technical, and just also wanting to socialize. You're here for a long time during the day, and you want to be friends with the people you work with, and they do a great job of that. Yeah, so excellent experiences all around, I think.
Cool. And if everyone just didn't see what I just sent the PEP form through. So if go claim your hours. So just before we wrap up, are there any questions from anyone? I guess it's pretty open, so feel free to ask anything. No.
I had to download Zoom for this meeting because I only have Microsoft Teams on my laptop, just that I tell everyone because I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Well, before we finish then, thanks so much, Ollie, Jesse, and Courtney for coming to talk to us and having us ask questions. It's been quite insightful, certainly for me. So I hope it's for everyone else. Funny, as soon as I put the PEP form in, people start leaving.
Classic. They're out.
Classic. We all know what they're here for. It's no lie. Like, we get it.
It happens. We've all been there. Actually, we didn't have PEP.
No, we didn't.
You didn't have PEP?
We didn't have PEP.
Wait, so when PEP start then?
You can figure that out.
Like 2019?
2019?
2019.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Okay.
When were you going to say, Ol?
I said 2018, but maybe.
Oh, it could have been. It could have been the year after we started, actually. That makes sense. What year did we start?
thank you.
2017.
Wow.
Mm. Good try. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
Yep.
If you ever need
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Always happy to have a
SUMO
chat.
alumni.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for having us. Hopefully
Yeah,
you guys
thank
found
you.
it interesting.
All good.
Thank you so much, guys. That was really interesting.
Woohoo.
All good.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
I won't keep you guys here. So any like last minute things, I'll end it.
Shoot them our way. All right. Thanks, guys.